January 23rd, 2017 at 6 o'clock p.m. If you wish to speak on an agenda or non-agenda item, please sign up at the sheet near the entrance door to the council chambers. You'll be called to speak during the public comment section. Comments or testimony on agenda items listed under public hearing, public comment will be taken at that time. Roll call, please.
Mayor Williams.
Here.
Dick Anderson.
Here.
Riley Hoagland.
Here.
Deanna Hinton. Here. Judy Casper is excused. Susan Walke. Here. And Kip Ward.
Here.
Thank you. Would you please all stand and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you so much. We have a couple of agenda changes to note. We do have an employee appreciation notice, but we also have a second one that we'll be bringing to your attention. And then we also have for you following along at home, H12 public hearing. We have a request to continue to February 13th. What else was I supposed to mention?
There were two public hearings that were advertised and or continued that were left off the written agenda. One was a public hearing under number 11 to obtain comments on proposed ordinance 2017-01. It was advertised for this evening. And number 12 was a land use hearing scheduled for this evening and was actually continued to this evening, but there is a request to further continue it to February 13th.
Thank you very much.
Your Honor, do we need a motion?
I don't believe we need a motion to
I-
the agenda.
I move to accept the amended agenda.
Second.
Motion is second. Any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Hearing none, motion carries. Okay, on to employee appreciation. These are always the fun ones. Our 10-year service award, Sherry Willett, Accounts Receivable Manager. Ron, would you like to say something?
Yes, come on up, Sherry. I'm gonna actually let her boss talk.
So it's my honor to introduce Sherry Willett, for those of you who may not have met her. She was hired in January of 2007 as our accounts receivable manager. Her really primary job is to run our utility billing for our water and our sewer accounts for the whole city. She also oversees our transit room tax returns and business license renewals and other miscellaneous billing and AR. So Sherry's work, when she does it right, it's very quiet. You don't hear anything, and when it's done wrong, you really hear about it. So I have not had the opportunity to talk about her work much, which is a good thing. But I'm really glad to be able to recognize her tonight for her great work. I kind of ran a query since she started. Her area has billed and collected over $57 million in water and sewer for the city.
We're going to let her go. Sorry.
And in transit room tax returns, she's processed over $40 million for the city. So those two together are the $100 million that she has been responsible for. I'm glad she hasn't asked to work on commission. That's obviously a huge amount of money and a really key job for the city. I appreciate Sherry's desire to continually improve the services in her area and to streamline efficiencies. Just a few of the changes she's made. She took our lien process and put it online so that real estate title companies or other agencies can actually see our liens online. It makes it a lot more effective. A lien isn't much good if nobody knows about it. We revised our utility billing, meter read dates, and payment due dates so that instead of having 15 days to pay, which seems awfully short, you now have a more standard 30 days to pay. And again, that customer service orientation comes through. The transit room tax review program, we started that. She was heavily involved in that, and it went real well for a while, and then it kind of busted. But then we've got it started up and running again. And she's managed and handled all that process. Our online payment system that we use, Express Bill Pay, which works very well, very well. She has been responsible for putting in and managing. She implemented a seasonal billing rate in our system, which is, setting up a new process in our billing system and new codes and understanding how to make that work. It's not an easy thing to do. She also implemented discounts for employees who get their bills electronically and pay online. Customers, sorry, not employees. Too much payroll today. She streamlined our license billing to consolidate, the OTP license, alarm license, VRD license, TRT license. Those all used to go out individually, billing for that. And they all now go out on one invoice, which is, again, very much nicer for customer perspective. When she started, we did not take credit cards for water or sewer or court or anywhere else in the city. She managed that process to allow to take credit card receipts for all of those. We've done several software upgrades. She's brought in new software to more effectively manage our tax returns, transient room tax returns. We implemented a lockbox system and a couple other changes that she made, and was able to reduce staffing by a half of an FTE, which when she starts out with 4 and reduces by half, that's a significant reduction in staffing that she was able to accomplish. She has a really great attitude. It's very fun to work with. I really appreciate her very focused customer service outlook and her strong work ethic. Just Friday, just kind of very timely, I got an email from a customer I thought I'd read real quickly. Just to let you know that you have an outstanding employee in your department. Sherry has been marvelous and a joy for me to work with. She is so helpful and knowledgeable, and the passion she has for doing her job comes through on the phone loud and clear. I bought a hotel a year ago, and she helped me back then, and a few minutes ago she was able to set up my account on Express Bill Pay. It is a breath of fresh air to deal with a city that cares about their customers and serves their citizens. And that's reflective of a lot of the comments that I receive on Sherry's work. Sherry has also a very strong work ethic, and more than once over a longer period of time than she should have had to, she has had to fill in for having a low staffing, either because of illnesses or other issues. And as her husband, I'm sure, can attest, she has put in an awful lot of hours sometimes where I have been actually really worried about her physical well-being, because she's just determined to do a great job, and even if she didn't have the staff to do it, she'd stay and get it done. I think the most validating feedback I've had on the quality of her work came several years ago when Ray Bartlett, who has in the past did some of our economic and fiscal analysis for setting up our system development charges, I sent him a lot of transactional detail from our utility billing system, and he was using it to model a new rate structure. And when you analyze and slice and dice data that way, it can be like opening a can of worms. You can find a lot of data discrepancies and issues in your data, like maybe an account that is flagged as sewer only has water charges, or you find customers who aren't getting their 400 cubic feet allowance that they're supposed to be getting, stuff like that. He called me once and talked about the data, and he said that our data is very clean and some of the best data that he's ever worked with before. And I think that just speaks volume to Sherry's management of the utility billing process. And we are very lucky to have her, and I hope she sticks around for a long time. Anything you want to add?
Sherry, don't go anywhere. Sherry. We have a little. Come on up here. A little token of appreciation.
Let's give Sherry a raise.
And what?
Thank you, Sherry.
Thank you, Sherry.
When I first started coming to City Hall, I didn't know who that was from the eyebrows down behind that computer monitor. I just see this tuft of hair. I come to find out it was Sherry. It's kind of like that guy on that TV show, Never Looked Above the Fence. But I've got to know Sherry very well through not only the city, but church, and a terrific lady, and well-deserved. Thank you for being part of our team. Ron?
Excellent.
Yes, sir. We are honoring another Sherry. Sherry Correa. Ron, I'm going to let you fill in the details.
It is my great pleasure to, actually, a little bit of pleasure and a little bit not so much. Sherry is actually leaving us. She is headed to Arizona. But I did want to tell you a little bit about what took place over the last 2 to 3 weeks. She took a vacation to Arizona. The day or so before, she told me that she was going down there because she and her husband have purchased a home. And when she came, and in our discussions, it was a thing. Well, you know, for our retirement, we'll have a home down in Arizona we'll be able to go to. So I didn't think very much of that while she was gone. And then when she came back, she told me and us that they had decided that they were going to move down there. And I asked her about work. Does she need a reference or something like that? And she said, well, yes, I think so. And about 2 days later, she came to announce to me that she's retiring completely. And I have to tell you, I was so thrilled when I heard that. It just couldn't happen to a more wonderful person. The thing I'd like to say about Sherry's been with us for 18 years. Is that right? I've often mentioned to our employees that we spend more time together than we do with our families, and that it's important that people are happy in their work. And so frequently I will ask when I'm visiting with our employees, are you happy in your work? And I can tell you that as I have talked with our employees, they have consistently said yes to that, and one of the reasons has been because of Sherry. And I can tell you that for me personally, that is very definitely the case, that one of the reasons I've enjoyed my job so much here is because of my association with her. We went through about a 6-month period where Heather Arcitoris, our Human Resources Director, had left for another position, and it took us about 6 months to find her replacement, Colleen Scanlon. During that time period, Sherry carried the ball for all of the human resources work that is involved. So not only her own work, but also that as an interim director. And I think I can speak for all of the staff that we would have been in some serious trouble if she had not picked up the slack on that. So it's with some chagrin, but mostly with just a tremendous satisfaction that I get to present her and thank her for her time here and tell you she's retiring.
I didn't mean to rush you off. If you'd like to say something. Okay.
I don't think you could stop the smile, right?
It's raining today down there, you know. It's raining down there.
Okay. Well, thank you, Ron, and thank you, Sherry's. That was good. That was nice. Good start meeting. Consent agenda. Minutes of meeting June 29th, 2016. Minutes of meeting July 11th, 2016. Minutes of meeting July... Ugh. This is what Sudafed will do to you. July 18th, 2016. Minutes of meeting July 25th, 2016.
Mr. Mayor?
Yes. Oh, I'm sorry, and I've got more. Minutes of meeting August 1st, 2016. Minutes of meeting August 8th, 2016. And the OLCC Commission application for off-premise sales. I'm sorry. Ms. Hinton.
Could I ask to pull number 8?
Okay.
I
Go ahead.
think we need to pull 2 and 7 since those minutes weren't finished.
Okay. Anyone else? Hearing none, get a motion for everything but 2, 7, and 8.
I move to approve the consent agenda with the exception of number 2, 7, and 8.
Waiting for a second.
Second.
Motion and a second. Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Hearing none, motion carries. Number
abstain.
8.
I abstain.
Oh, okay. Well, I don't know. Oh, because of the minutes of the meeting, I understand. So you didn't get a chance to read them and all that.
Well,
That's fine.
besides that, I was on council when,
I wasn't.
yeah, so I can't vote for it.
But you can.
Well, actually, I think you could, because we're simply approving the minutes.
No, but
That's
you're
what I'm just saying, you
approving
didn't
it,
have
their
to, but
accuracy, and I
I
wasn't,
understand.
okay.
Yeah. Same with you, Councilor Hoagland?
Correct.
You good? Okay. All right, so with that, then I need a motion on number 8.
Deanna,
Well, 2, 7, and 8.
did you have a comment on number 8?
Oh, for me? No, I just wanted
Wait,
to
you-
vote for them separately.
Okay, yeah, they were,
Oh, you
Number
just
2.
wanted and voted separately?
I'm
No,
sorry.
Oh, because
I-
you were abstaining.
Okay, I'm so
Yes, I
sorry.
understand.
You were 2 and 7.
Sorry.
Okay, sorry, got it backwards. Okay.
I move to approve consent agenda number 8.
Second. Okay. Motion and a second. Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Hearing none, motion carries. Did we take care of 2 and 7 then? I'm sorry.
2 and 7 were not prepared yet, so
Okay,
we'll have
that's
to
all right.
deal
Thank
with
you.
them at another time.
It's going to be one of those nights. I apologize.
Okay.
All right. Now we are at comments from citizens present on agenda, non-agenda items. This is an opportunity for members of the audience to bring to the council's attention any item not listed on the agenda for public hearing or public comment. Comments are limited to 5 minutes per speaker, and the city recorder will use the light system. Speakers may not yield their times to others, and as a general rule, this is not a time for exchange of questions. At the conclusion of this agenda item, a councilor may discuss or raise questions regarding an item presented by the speaker. The mayor has the authority to reduce the time allowed for comment in accordance with the number of persons present and signed up to speak. I don't have a sheet. Nobody signed up. Okay, anyone wish to speak who did not get a chance to sign up? Mr. Roloff.
Whoops, daisy. I thought I would be proactive, and name is Jay Roloff. I live in 1142 Northeast Lakewood, but I'm also involved with the Congregational Church Warming Shelter. So I thought, rather than wait until the end of the meeting and not have any notes, I'd come at the beginning of the meeting with my notes and tell you a little bit about what's been going on, because the weather hasn't been any better than it was the last time I talked to you. However, this week it's getting better. I want to just give you a picture of the Congregational Church side of what's going on with the warming shelter, because the First Baptist Church has not been operating in January and didn't operate very much in December. So everything I have to say right now is oriented towards the Congregational Church's role as a hosting site for the warming shelter, which is a 501(c)(3) here in Lincoln City. Our church began the warming shelter back in 2012. In 2016 is when we formed an independent 501(c)(3) community not-for-profit, now called the Lincoln City Emergency Warming Shelter, Inc., and became one of the we became one of the couple of hosting centers. In December of 2015, we were open about 4 nights when the temps were 29 to 31 degrees. And we were sheltering an average of 4 adults each night. A year later, in December of 2016, as I mentioned at the last meeting, we were open for 15 nights when overnight temps were 29 to 40 degrees, and we had 5 nights below freezing. We sheltered 267 adults, which is an average of 57 homeless for 1 or more nights, because each person doesn't stay all the time. So in terms of people, individuals, we had 57 homeless that were staying in our shelter for 1 or more nights, for a whole total of 267 beds. The winter has continued to be a record breaker. In January, with this month, through the 15th, so for 1/2 month, we have been open for 14 nights in 1/2 month. when the temps were 22 to 40 degrees. We've had 8 nights when it's been below freezing. We've sheltered 284 adults, an average of about 20 per night. I was there on Saturday night, and it was 19 people we sheltered, 3 women and 17 men. So we're scheduled to operate several more nights in January. In fact, they'll be operating tonight. And obviously, we expect to be more in February. So this winter is going to be a major event for the warming shelter. Don, I came with the right phone number for you this time to help out. We're really hurting for volunteers, but mostly we're hurting for overnights. And we split the overnights into 2 shifts, from 9 until after midnight, and then from after midnight until about 6 in the morning. So one person doesn't have to take the whole overnight. They can sleep a half shift and get and serve the other half. And that's the area where we're really hurting. We need overnight volunteers. And if you could be an overnight volunteer, or you want to do any other kind of volunteer for the warming shelter, you contact Sharon Padilla. And Sharon Padilla's phone number is 541-992-5478. And we would really appreciate that, because we're kind of burnt out. Thank you very much.
I have a question.
Yes, please.
Are you able to feed these people? Do you have a program in place?
Yeah, I guess dinners don't seem to be a problem. Breakfasts, we have a problem because it has to be kind of, it can't be ham and eggs and all of that kind of stuff, because then you have plates and forks and all the stuff you have to clean up. So it has to be the type of thing you can serve in paper cups and paper bowls and paper plates. And we make do by buying cereals and donuts and things like that. But breakfasts are something that could be helpful. On the hot meal side, we do have a lot of support for that.
For dinner, you mean?
For dinner, yeah. And usually what we do is we make bag lunches. So pre-made sandwiches for their lunches would be very, very helpful. Because one of the volunteers, about 4 in the morning, has to get up and put these sandwiches together. If you put them together too soon, they get kind of soggy. So we try to make them early in the morning so that they're relatively fresh when people leave.
Mr. Mayor?
Please.
How many volunteers, when you're staffed to your best number, how many volunteers is that per night for both shifts?
You mean in the facility, if you were to walk
Right.
in and count up the number of volunteers?
Yeah.
Or do you mean over the whole?
Most optimum, no, just for one night, if you were staffed to the highest number that works well.
Okay, that's a little hard because, like I say, we're scrapping for volunteers.
Right.
But I would say that you got to have at least 3 or 3 to do the serving of the meals, and you have to have at least 2 or 3 for the overnights. So that's 6, and then you've got a cleaning crew of at least 3, so that's 9. We have a security guy, that's 10, and we have check-in people who sign them in and make sure we have all of their details. So I'm going to say at least a dozen. I'm going to say at least a dozen. And if we're shy on any of the, I gave you minimal numbers. If we're shy in any of those areas, then we have more difficulty in handling the people coming in.
Okay, thank you.
And Jay, could you, since we have you,
That was my line to you last time.
could you speak to how, I'm going to make this easy, how easy it is to spend the night there as a
Sure.
volunteer?
Well, first of all, I'm 6'4", okay? So and when I go and my wife and we travel, we ask for a king-size bed. Well, You don't get anything like that. What you get, they have a regular fold-out kind of camping cots for the clients that come in. We got 20 of those. And we can expand it because we have a reserve. But for the volunteers, we have fold-out cots that have springs to the kind of and they have a little mattress that goes down on top. A lot of our overnight volunteers bring their own pillow, and some of them bring a sleeping bag or something that they're comfortable with. But if they don't have that, we have a pillow and we have a blanket that's clean for them to use. So having a place to sleep isn't difficult. In our church, we have a library that's off limits to the clients. So if you have a hard time and you want sleeping, or you're a light sleeper, you can take your cot if you're an overnight volunteer and put it into that library, close the door, and you've got a really nice, secure, quiet area to get your 4 or 5 hours of sleep. Really, the function of the volunteer who's handling the overnight shift is much more supervisory than it is hands-on. There are only a few hands-on things that the overnight people do, one of which is making all those sandwiches. But if we got them, then you don't have to make them, so that might disappear. But just staying awake and being alert to answer questions or give directions. We have a lot of rules, and we just have to enforce those rules. And so you're an enforcer. So if for instance, we like to keep the bathroom lights on. We just don't like the idea of a dark bathroom, somebody going in there and we don't know what they're doing. So we just require that. So if the bathroom light goes off, we get up, walk over and say, excuse me, we've got to leave that light on, and that type of thing. And we check to make sure that people don't wander into the church's facilities, like the gathering place, which is off limits to them, or the sanctuary. Somebody might think, well, it'd be a great idea to go in the sanctuary. They're padded benches. I'll just lie down there. Well, so we just police. We walk around and we look to see if everything is going okay. So it is not strenuous, other than for an old guy like me, being up for a long time at night is kind of like coming back from a trip to New York. I have a kind of a jet lag issue for the day after. I'm not used to having my sleep pattern interrupted that way. But as far as being what I do as a volunteer on site, no, it's just it's not hard. It's just unless many of you stay up until 2 or 3 in the morning, it's an unusual thing for me.
Yeah, I just asked because my wife and I have done it, and the first time you do it, it can be a little stressful, but it's easy.
Yeah, once you get used to it, and you're dealing here, and this is just like any other thing in life, you're dealing with different kind of people than you normally associate with, and so you got to get past that. And the best way to get past that is to talk to people. That's really how you get past it, and you begin to learn more about them and what they love and we've run across some very interesting. In fact, we have one guy, his name's Tyson, and he came to us as a individual and in deep trouble. He began attending some of the different events that we have at church. He got to talking with several of the people that are volunteers there. He's gotten to the point now where he's really got himself all cleaned up. He went to interview for a job, and today at Georgia and I, when we were there, we're talking with him. He was going back now for his second interview. He's so excited, and and just to see how this guy has moved up. And then you'll have the other ones that never change. They're the same, somewhat childlike, but we do not have too much of a problem with difficulties. The people themselves are self-policing. And secondly, they all know when they sign in, if they don't obey the rules, they are asked to leave. And if they don't, we call 911. The police are very fast, and they come and they get them. And we have to do that. We have another rule that the warming shelter closes at 10. And if somebody comes and bangs on the door at 2 o'clock in the morning, we don't let them in. Now, when I was on Saturday, that happened. Guy came late, banged on the door, and we just said, look, pal, you got to be in this place before 10 o'clock. We're not letting you in. But what we did was we gave him food, so he had something to eat. We gave him a lot of blankets and a pillow. And in our church, there's an alcove, which is sheltered from the wind. It's right at the door before you get into the main office building. And we bedded him down in front of that door. And then the next morning, when the volunteers came in to serve the breakfast, and that's when we let him in so he could have some breakfast with the rest of them. And he understood. He said, okay, that's cool. Once they know that there are strict rules that they have to follow, they do administer or do it to behave to those rules.
Right. Well, thank you, Jane. Thank you for all you do.
One more question.
Yes, please.
Two more.
Okay.
Two more, okay.
Who's donating this food?
Well, right now, we buy it. I'm sorry, you're asking a general question, and I'm thinking breakfast. Breakfast we've been buying, but the main course is either donated by restaurants or they're donated by private individuals. Somebody will bring a ham or a whole turkey or something like that. It's kind of, Sharon Padilla is a kind of organizer. And so she will be people will contact her and say, look, I can do this for you. And she'll say, great. And then she knows she's got that covered. So she is able to kind of put together ahead of time who's going to be doing what. Sometimes we just have somebody drop by. We've had several pizza parlors just come by with pies. Hey, here they are. Sometimes it's serendipitous and sometimes it's planned. But I don't know of a time when we weren't able to serve an evening meal. I do know of times when we've had to scratch to put together a lunch or a breakfast.
Do you accept food from, say, restaurants that have leftovers? So they didn't sell all of their lasagna that night and they've got an extra pan? Do you take that?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. And we wouldn't ask whether it's leftover or not. We would just accept what you came in with, very gratefully. And then one last point I would make to you, just I knew of somebody came up with the question of, on those nights when the Episcopalian Church that does the nights, they do 2 nights a week and a breakfast. I think they do hot. It's a hot meal program they have, and this person who was a volunteer said, well, why are we feeding our folks, and the church is right across the street from us, and they've got a whole dinner operation up there. Why don't we just use that? And then it was such an obvious question, and it's such an obvious answer, because they serve early. We don't start accepting people in our church until 6 o'clock. And that dinner's already been served by then. So, in a way, we figured out a way to save some money in an effort on those nights when our church hosts, which is you never know exactly when it is, but if it's a Tuesday and a Thursday when they're serving across the street, people can go just across the street and get their food before they even show up. Well, I shouldn't even say go across the street. They haven't even shown up for us yet because we're not open yet. And you can get a really nice hot meal over there.
Thank you. I just have a question and a comment. When you close at 10, is that just so you can keep order? I mean,
yeah, like I say, we've been doing this since 2012, and we've learned that you just, in order to have a sane, well-ordered operation, you've got to make sane laws, rules, and you have to stay by them. And we found that 10 o'clock, and I don't want you to misunderstand what I'm saying, but if somebody has their stash of liquor in a bush somewhere or in their bike pack or whatever they have, and they want to get a drink before, that's okay. We don't turn people away unless they're abusively drunk, that kind of thing. So 10 o'clock seems to be magic. Or if they want to go and they want to be with their friends and have take advantage of what the city offers during the evening, 10 o'clock seems to be a realistic time to say, look, pal, that's it. You've got to be in by then. And it's also lights out. So 10 o'clock is a magic time. You got to be in your bunk, and the lights go out, and that's the end of it, and we don't open up again after that.
Okay.
That doesn't mean you can't leave. If somebody wants to leave, we say, fine, but don't come back, because we won't open the door for you. And it sounds bad in a way, but let me tell you, it works. Once they understand, it really works.
And then I just had a comment, which is when I visited on January 2nd, when it was so cold, I just wanted to let you know that I was so impressed with the organization. Everybody had their specific jobs to do when they were doing them, and it was so well organized, and people who were there because they needed the shelter seemed very appreciative. They were doing what they could, making coffee and just making themselves at home, so to speak. So thank you.
But I would be remiss if I didn't point out to you that we can't host Family Promise when we're running the warming shelter. And we like to host Family Promise 6 times a year if we can. Family Promise is a vetted program, 14 people, success rate of 80% or higher. I mean, it is a gold key operation in Lincoln City. I just don't know of another one that has that kind of success. So we want to help them out. But from the month of from November all the way through February, we can't schedule Family Promise because we don't know during that period if we're going to be needed to function as a warming shelter. And we are the only game in town, really. And so that means that we can't do another mission operation that we feel is very important, that has proven its value. We just have to tell them, no, I'm sorry, we can't. Find somebody else to host, because Family Promise is a week-long event. If you host Family Promise, you host those people for a full week. So we can't say to Family Promise, don't worry about it, we'll do it in December, because we don't know. If in the middle of December the temperatures drop below 40, then we're in a real problem. You can't take a bunch of families and say, I'm sorry, you're going to have to leave, and by law we can't commingle the two. So we have our own restrictions, and we also can't use that portion of the building. It's all set up, and so we're given up. We can't have our normal functions there. And I've made this pitch before the council. The answer is to have a dedicated facility in Lincoln City to handle the warming shelter requirement.
So if we did get the one phone number, is there a website? Can they just stop by the church if people want to volunteer? Any other avenues for that?
Yeah, there's a website, and it's Lincoln City Warming Shelter, Inc., and you can find it that way. But Sharon's the best person because she's the one that does the and it'd be nice for you to be able to say, this is what I can do and what I can't do, and have a conversation with her to get the volunteer person fit into the best possible place.
Thank you, Jay. Sure appreciate it.
Thanks, Jay.
Thanks for coming forward. Anyone else who did not sign up would like to speak? Seeing none, we're moving on. Where am I? Okay, presentations, future Dee River Bridge, Schooner Creek Bridge rehabilitation, Mr. Jerry Wolcott, Oregon Department of Transportation. Do you need a screen or anything like that?
Yes, please. For the record, my name is Jerry Wolcott. I'm a project leader with the Oregon Department of Transportation in Corvallis, Area 4, and that's 3700 Philomath Boulevard in Corvallis.
Thank you, Jerry. Welcome.
Thank you. I'm here to talk to you about the Devil's Lake Outlet, Schooner Creek, and Siltcoos River Bridges project that we have coming up. It's been a couple of years since I've been here, I think. We had the Nell Scott project, and we've let the dust settle for a little bit, and now it's time for us to have another project coming through your neck of the woods. So I'd like to explain a little bit about that. The problem is that we have corrosion on these bridges. Most of them were built in the 1930s, and if you've been on them recently, you know that to be true. If nothing's done, we have to replace them, and for many years, that was the only option that we had. But more recently, like in the last 10 years or so, we started to use this new technique called cathodic protection. and it allows us to repair and protect those bridges and keep them in place. If you live on the coast and you own a boat, you're probably familiar with cathodic protection because that's a little zinc anode right here on the bottom of a boat. And what that does is it helps to prevent the corrosion on a boat. And it works basically by inhibiting the rust. So the rust is made up of sodium chloride. The chloride gets into the concrete. It attracts itself to the iron and the rebar and the reinforcement bar that we have, and that causes rust. The rust swells and causes spalling, so you'll have pieces of concrete that pop off of the bridge. This was first discovered a couple hundred years ago in England, but it really wasn't widely used until the 1930s. We've only begun to use it in the last 10 years or so. So we connect a metal to be protected. We connect the metal that's going to be protected to a more easily corroded sacrificial metal that acts as the anode, and it creates this electrochemical reaction. And then the sacrificial metal, in this case a zinc anode, corrodes instead of the protected metal, which is the bridge and the rebar in the bridge. Here's an example of zinc anodes on large ships that are being built. And here's another example. This is the Fogarty Creek Bridge that we worked on not last summer but the summer before. And that's down here not too far outside of Depot Bay. And you can see before we started there was corrosion and spalling down here along the edge of these. And there was a lot of surface area that needed to be cleaned up and fixed. And this is what it looks like now. So it's a lot of work. There's a lot of hand work that needs to happen to it, but it really makes a big difference. And it preserves the bridges for another 20 or 25 years. So there's two different types of cathodic protection, passive and impressed currents. With the two bridges in Lincoln City, we'll be using one of each. In Schooner Creek, we'll have passive, and on Devil's Lake Bridge, we'll use impressed current. Now, Devil's Lake Bridge is located right smack dab in the middle of town, and it's a big bridge. It's 4 lanes. This is a picture underneath it. Just in case you haven't been underneath it lately, you can see there's some spalling down here, and there's a lot of surface area. It's a 4-lane bridge. There's a lot of surface area that needs to be repaired. It's in rough shape, but it's safe to drive over, and our intent is to keep it that way. The work that needs to be done on this bridge is relocate the utilities that are hanging on the bridge to cross the creek. We'll chip and remove the spalled concrete and then replace that corroded rebar. We'll do some structural strengthening of the bridge itself, replace the bridge rail. We'll do ADA improvements on the approaches to the bridge and on the bridge, and then we'll install the cathodic protection system. And that involves quite a bit of noisy equipment, saws, air chisels, sandblasters. There'll be containment around the bottom of the bridge. All this work is on the sides and on the bottom of the bridge, except for the railing. So most of that work's going to be done underneath. They'll have containment underneath there to capture all that dust. And then in order to contain it, that air, they'll have compressors and air handlers to keep that circulating and keep that dust out from getting all over everywhere else. And of course, trucks and forklifts with backup alarms. Our challenges are to minimize the impact of traffic. That's the main thing. And we know that since most of the work is going to be happening underneath the bridge, that shouldn't be a problem for us. We'll have to take a lane when we replace the rails. And when we do that, when we take a lane on the bridge, we'll only do that at night. We also need to be able to provide ADA access to pedestrians when we're working on there. So during construction, we'll have to have ways for people to get around and for all abilities. And so in that sense, we're going to be having a crosswalk and a rectangular rapid flashing beacon temporarily installed to the north of the Devil's Lake Bridge. So we'll put a temporary island out there, and then we'll have a crosswalk and a temporary flashing signal so people can get around the construction zone.
Jerry, may I ask a question?
Yes.
A couple months back, Councilor Norikis and I had a chance to go along with a citizen who's legally blind and walk with his dog, and we put the blinds on and walk with the stick. And one of the real challenges we had was when something ended. So we're at a sidewalk and we're moving along just great.
Yeah.
There's no transition warning. Is that something that will be apparent to folks with vision impairment?
Yes. Yeah. ODOT's just taken a real large leap forward in the last few months to make sure that everything that we're doing is by the book, and very carefully so. So we've made a lot of changes in the way we inspect things and the way that we set things up during construction, and we're very mindful of sidewalk ends. And in fact, on this one, we've actually extended the length of the project a little bit further to the south so that we can connect a good sidewalk all the way to the intersection there at the D Sands. So we'll be improving things all the way
Great,
through.
thank you.
So I have concerns about the equipment noise because we're so close to the hotels in that area. And so I've asked the team to take a look at what we can do to mitigate that noise. At this point, we don't know if we can do anything, but I'm continuing to challenge them to take another harder look at it so we'll see. And then the main thing, and then the final thing is that we want to ensure that the structure that's underneath the bridge it's prepared so that they can remove it if there's high water and a flood. So in the specifications for this project, we'll ask the contractor to be sure that they can remove that structure within 48 hours. So if there's a projection for a big storm, lots of water and debris go underneath that bridge, they'll need to be able to lift that up and take it out of the way. The Devil's Lake Outlet, we're going to start this entire project in winter of 2017. It's a big bridge, and if we look at the way that contractors have worked on bridges in the past, and we take that productivity amount and apply it to the square footage on this bridge, we figure that if they work a 20-hour shift, that's 2 shifts a day, it will last a year. And if they go to a 10-hour day, which is 1 shift, it'll last 2 years. This is on the D River. So this is an estimated time. We're real early in this process, but I wanted to make sure we got that out. And we know that the night work is allowed in here in Lincoln City with notification, and we intend to do that. But we also want to gather input from the community, the council, beginning with you, about whether you prefer to get it over with quickly and over a shorter amount of time, but later at night, or you want to take your time and have it over 2 years, a longer time, and over 1 shift. Now, you don't have to decide tonight. I'm actually just starting that conversation right now, and we're gathering input through April. So we're actually hiring a consulting team that's very good at public outreach. They helped us out with the Pioneer Mountain Eddyville project and did a great job with their outreach to the coast. They're going to come back into this community in April and ask these same questions of the city council, of citizens, and of businesses that might be impacted. So,
Jerry, I'm sorry, I need to go back to one thing because I'm
Go right ahead.
suffering from a cold and not paying strict attention. You said something about if high tides come in and debris comes in, you can lift the bridge. Are you talking
No.
about what the repair work?
So there's going to be this false work that's underneath the bridge.
Okay,
And that's all wood.
got it. Okay.
And so what we want to be able to do is take that out of the way so
Okay.
that all that debris underneath doesn't tear it out.
I'm pretty sure I heard that, but it wasn't
No.
sinking in.
No worries.
Thank you, okay.
So again, 2 shifts versus 1 shift, 2 shifts over 1 year, 1 shift over 2 years. Give it some thought. We'll also have that outreach going on before construction and then during construction too, so you'll know what's going on. Now, the second bridge that's in Lincoln City is Schooner Creek. And you can see in this Google map, it says the Siletz. It's actually not the Siletz. This is Schooner Creek. This is Taft area here. So as you're coming into the south part of town, this is the bridge right here. And Schooner Creek's a kind of a neat-looking bridge, although it's just a little rough. That pipe on the outside is actually the city's sewer line. And so we're working with them as far as utilities and how to move stuff out of the way during the time of construction. And here you can see some of the spalling, on one of the beams, and then the rail here needs to be replaced too. And same kind of work has to be done here. Utility relocation, chipping away the concrete, replacing the rebar, structural strengthening, replacing the rail, ADA improvements, and then install the system of cathodic protection.
And Jerry, sorry.
Yes.
With the replacement of the railings, do you have a design yet? That's something we'll have some public input on?
I haven't seen the design yet. I'm not sure we'll have a whole lot of flexibility with that, because a big piece of this one is making sure that it's structurally able to handle a car or a truck hitting it.
Right.
And so what we want to do is, with these 2 bridges, make sure that they're safe.
Right. I would just be, we've talked several times now about that being the entry to the city, basically at the south end.
Yes.
And I'm sure I would like to encourage anyone who's designing it to think about the aesthetics of it,
Okay.
obviously with an eye to cost, but what can we do to dress that up a bit?
So I had a conversation with a structural engineer, and he asked me similar questions. And what I asked him was, so what did we do at Millport Slough, south of here, when we did that bridge there, I don't know how long ago that was, 7 years ago or so? And that rail is what we're looking at this point, although, again, we're not completely done. So that rail allows you to be able to look through and see the view and the ocean there. It's not the historic types of rails that you might be thinking about.
Yeah, I'm not thrilled. I mean, I understand it's functional,
Yeah,
but sometimes we can go a little too far, I think, on functionality and forget that we've got to look at it every day.
I understand.
Just an encouragement.
Okay,
Yeah,
thank
just
you.
my opinion.
Okay. Okay. Let's see, similar type of work, similar equipment that we have. I'm not as concerned about the noise because there aren't as many hotels and residents as close as they are with the D River. So that being said, I still ask the team the same questions for this side too. So our challenges are to minimize the traffic impact. Again, same thing, when we do have to take a lane to do the rail, we'll do that at night. We also are going to be providing ADA access for pedestrians around the construction zone. In this case, to the south of the bridge, we'll do the same thing. We'll have a crosswalk there temporarily so that people can go around the construction zone, and there'll be an RFB there too. So another flashing beacon so people can cross the highway safely. And then again, mitigating equipment noise. Let's see what we can do and make that happen. Schooner Creek Bridge, here's the second question for you. So we can do all this at once. What we can do is put it in the specifications so that we tell the contractor, when you begin to work at D Lake, we also want you to work on Schooner Creek. Get it done all at once. Or we can say, finish one and then the other. Like to get your input on that too. This one is going to take us, if you're looking at 10-hour days, about a year to do the work there. And again, we'll have communication during construction and before and during construction too.
Excuse me one second, Ron. The boring will be all done by then, correct, by the time we get to that area?
Yes, I need to bring Mr. Welcott up to date on that. We have already talked to the city council about the options of moving the line off of the bridge. And we have a contractor that's on site right now doing some boring, and we're looking at piggybacking on that project. And so, yes, it would be done by the time these guys are ready to get going.
Great, thank you. Good. That's great news. Okay, so this is the second question that this consultant team will be coming back to ask the community about. How do you want to do this? You want to knock it all out at once, take the pain all at once, or do you want us to try to minimize it? Because it will be happening over the course of a year or 2 years, so you won't be able to miss your busy season.
And the eclipse falls into that time too, doesn't it? Yeah.
Yeah, we won't be doing any work during that.
Yeah,
Okay.
it's all-
No, I didn't think you'd be starting until the end of 2017. Isn't that correct?
Sorry, it's this August, isn't it?
Yes.
Yes, you're correct.
Yeah, this
Yes.
would take place after the eclipse.
Yeah, thank you. The third bridge in this project is Silk Coos River Bridge. It's well south of here. It's 2 hours south of here. It's south of Florence in Lane County. I just put some pictures up here because it's a beautiful bridge. And we'll have the same kind of things going on there. Structural elements, replacing the rail, and replacing some other things to make it function better, and then installing cathodic protection too. So what's next? We're going to continue to develop our plans. Our outreach will begin in the spring, in April. The consulting team will come back and find out tell everyone about what's coming, what the impacts as far as the noise would be, the duration of and then the last question is about the duration of the Devil's Lake project, or the Devil's Lake Bridge project, and then the timing of that with Schooner Creek too. We'll also be applying for a staging permit on urban renewal property in the northeast quadrant of the Devil's Lake Bridge. So that's a great place for us to be able to stage our equipment. It also has a nice little berm there that we can dampen some of the noise with too. Our bid let is in early November 2017, so we expect about a year from now we'll start construction. Okay, can I answer any questions or concerns?
Mr. Mayor?
Please.
I just have one. I know with construction noise, there are a variety of ways to buffer that depending on the project. And also lighting. Have you given any thought to lighting? I know you have to light the project area, but
Well, mostly they'll be underneath, and they'll be within containment, and so they'll be lighting
They'll be
in
under.
there, but you really won't notice it.
The Walport Bridge that they replaced, and I've got two bridges. You know, I think it was this bridge. They had two Art Deco on each side, lamps that go up that are colored. It's beautiful.
Yeah.
And I'm just wondering, that was done for them at some point. Is there a chance that you can do something like that for us?
We have a historian that's on the team, and generally her perspective is to preserve it as it was, if it's historically significant. The two bridges in Lincoln City are not what you would call historically significant. The one at Schooner Creek is, so we're kind of making effort, a little bit more effort there to preserve that as it is. Those features, although they're gorgeous, I agree, they wouldn't be something that would be historically accurate to add to the nature of the bridge right now. So I don't think so. I can ask her, but I don't think so.
Can we lobby?
I'll lobby her for you on your behalf.
Maybe the city could chip in something. I don't know, but that's something that's really it's a big project you're doing, but it makes a statement.
Anyone else? Councilor Hoagland?
I think part of the parks plan shows like possible footpath underneath the bridge, similar to Fogarty Creek. What your opinions on that, or anything like that? In our own parks plan, there had been suggestions as far as walking underneath that. What is D River Bridge to you?
River?
What is that? You see anything from that point of view?
I know people do it now. They go underneath there now. There's lots of graffiti down there.
D River, yeah. Huh?
Yeah.
I mean, they're not walking from the beach to go that way, but I mean, there's the bridge itself with the.
So would we put a path underneath it?
No, in the future, like.
I'm not sure I understand.
I guess I'm not being clear. How many years do you anticipate the bridge itself to be viable, as it stands?
20 or 25 with this change. And one of the things that you're probably thinking about is, are we going to make changes that will be strengthen it seismically? And they will, but only insofar as it will allow people who are on the bridge to get off of it safely during an earthquake. But it won't be earthquake-proof. If you look at the one that the bridge that we did in Millport Slough, that one, when we replaced that, we made that earthquake and tsunami resistant. And what you need to do is huge types of pipes or beams that go down way into the ground, and they allow you to be able to withstand the liquefaction that happens during an earthquake. So it keeps the bridge from moving during that earthquake. And then it has to be strong enough to be able to withstand the tsunami, which is flooding in and then taking whatever it wants to on the way back out and piling that up against the bridge and then going back and forth a number of times over a few hours. So to answer your question, long ways around the horn, we will be likely replacing that bridge with something that's a seismic upgrade, but I don't know when at this point. I've heard rumors that they're looking at some sort of a long-term plan to be able to replace these bridges. And when that happens, it'll be a big bridge through there, because that's in a swale, and it needs to be strong enough to be able to withstand some pretty significant seismic forces and water forces. And at that point, we may look at something where it's high enough where you might be able to have a path underneath there.
Yeah, but not as it stands right there, to have like a walking path underneath it.
No, not right now.
And then similarly, like was it a hanging footbridge over the side or something that was talked about, something up one side or the other?
Yeah, we were talking about that, and that's not in the scope of this project, but what we are doing is making sure that the sidewalk is wide enough to be to meet some ADA standards.
Because it's quite narrow, I mean.
It is.
Yeah, and then similarly with the Schooner Creek Bridge that has a very high up, to get on it,
Yeah.
it's
We're planning to
significantly
fix
higher
that,
than,
too.
so that will be
Yeah, we'll smooth
stretched
that
out.
out. Yes. Go ahead.
Underneath of the Schooner Creek Bridge is, nice and big concrete, and I think a lot of people see that. Is it going to be concrete colored, or is there like an area, is it an opportunity for art or something there on that, underneath of it, that big wide foot, I don't know what it's called.
Let's go back.
That,
There.
that thing, yeah.
Oh, so this here?
Yes.
Art? Like what
Something.
kind of art? Looks
People
like
walk, right, you know, it's something to see. I don't know.
I hadn't talked about that. I'll ask.
Is there, additionally, is there solar lights or anything like that that could be put on those pillars along those bridges? It's very dark there, and similarly at Deep River, as you walk there, that there's the path there because it's, you know, it's quite dangerous in the bike path. When you're crossing that, you know, on your bike, you're either on the road or it's very narrow on a bike, you know, so it's kind
Okay.
of dangerous.
So I'm sorry, are you thinking of doing solar lighting or solar panels for?
Solar lighting
Oh,
for,
okay.
for pedestrian traffic as a way to see where you're at, due to the fact that it's so dark. And then the curb, if you're on the curb and come off the curb, it's significantly higher than a lot of the other places in town there.
Yes.
So will that be adjusted so it's not like a 8 or 10 inch drop? I don't know what it is, but I remember it being very.
Trying to remember, we did talk about that.
At Schooner Creek,
I can't
yeah.
remember, well, I can't remember where we landed on that. So I know we talked about it, and I know there's going to be a lift of asphalt on that bridge, but I can't remember if that's going to affect the curb or not. I'll
I
ask.
mean, if you put a lift on there, that will reduce the difference from the where you would walk to that, you know,
Okay.
the height of the road.
What I have is the rail. Can we make it more historic? The amber Art Deco text. And then also art on the abutments, and then solar lighting for the pads, and then the curb face going to be lowered.
Are you going to be doing any kind of homelessness preventative maintenance on the north and south sides of Schooner Creek Bridge, specifically the north side?
You mean under here? Where is it? Under here?
Mm-hmm.
Hadn't talked about that.
It's pretty
Yeah.
pretty easy to get in there and sleep.
You're right. We'll look at that too. Great ideas, thank you.
Anyone else?
Mr. Mayor, Jerry, where, on this bridge, where are your staging spots? Are you going to be south in the,
Yeah, let's see, so right here, this is actually, this little pie-shaped area right here is a great spot for that, and that's actually ODOT property, so we'll stage right here.
and a little further north there is a park?
True, there is a park there, this area, I think that's the city's.
One of the things we'll want to make sure is then that we're timing, that's being used as staging area now for the boring, and not, Mr. Chandler, making sure that we don't redo the park too soon, I guess would be the, I would assume if you're going to stage there, there's a likelihood that it may run into, where the park area is just north of there.
I think we'll be okay.
Yeah?
I think we'll stay off of that area. Yeah.
Okay.
Anyone else?
Other questions?
Thank you.
My pleasure.
Appreciate it very much, Jerry.
Mr. Mayor,
Yes.
Jerry, just as a compliment, I don't know if anybody remembers, but Jerry was heavily involved in the 101 Mel Scott project early on and often. And in my opinion, they did an excellent job with handling this. So I'm very much assured, knowing you're on the project,
Absolutely.
feel a lot better knowing how you've handled other projects. So thank you.
My pleasure. We've really enjoyed the great relationship that we've had with this city.
Thank you very much.
I do have one more question. Do you anticipate your workers, the time that they're here, do you anticipate them living here, or do you anticipate them commuting here? And about how many workers does this
I
project
understand that there's
complete?
only a handful of contractors that do this kind of work, and so I suspect they go all over the place, and they probably park in an area for a while. And, a lot of the times, like with the PME project, folks would, stay locally during the week, and then they'd go home on the weekends occasionally. And so, yeah, I would think so. I would think most of them would.
Anyone else? All right. Thank you.
My pleasure.
Okay. Submission of annual financial statement for fiscal year 2015-2016.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. We have finished and published our 2015-16 audited financial statements. They are available on our website. Included in your packet is some council communication from myself with some comments, as well as some letters from our auditors.
Debbie, I'm sorry, could I ask you to pull the mic up just a little bit?
Yeah. I'm pleased to report that we did get a clean audit opinion on our statements. And one of the things I like about our auditors is they consider communication with our council to be really critical. And so Tim Gillette, who is a partner with Talbot, Corolla, and Warwick, is here to report on our audit.
Great. Hi, good evening, everybody. Hi, I am Tim Gillette with
TKW.
yes, Talbot, Corville, and Warwick, but everybody calls us TKW. I see some familiar faces. I see some new faces. Nice to see those of you again that I've seen before, and nice to see the new folks. For those that haven't heard me before, I tend to keep my report pretty brief because in my experience that's how most people want it, but I'm always happy to take questions, answer anything. So as I go, don't be afraid to speak up as we go along. It's a fairly big document, the annual report of the city. There's only a few parts of it that are the auditors, belong to the auditors. Most of it is Debbie and her staff putting together this information for the city. So I will mostly talk about my pieces of it. So my first part starts on page 1, the independent auditor's report. And it goes on for about 3 full pages. I tell you kind of the good parts, to summarize it briefly. Top of page 2, where it actually gives our opinion, which is really kind of what you pay us for, is where we say, in our opinion, the financial statements referred to above present fairly. That's kind of the key phrase, in all material respects with all the other qualifiers, in accordance with generally accepted accounting principles, et cetera. This is the so-called clean opinion from the auditor. There's only three things we can say. They're very standardized, prescribed. This is the one that you want from us. We go through talking about the degree of our responsibility for the other pieces in the report. There's some things like the MD&A and some schedules of funding progress, et cetera, where we actually don't provide any assurance at all. There are other pieces, the budgetary comparison information, for example, where we do give what we call an in relation to opinion, where we say, in our opinion, it's fairly stated in relation to the financial statements taken as a whole. Other supplementary information, same kind of thing, fairly stated in relation to. And then we talk about the pieces that we don't express an opinion on at all, such as the additional schedules and so forth in the back. So the next thing after our report is management's discussion and analysis. I always like to call attention to this. This is a really nice summary. If you're not going to study the whole, whatever this is, 100 pages, this is a great place to spend your time because it gives you a really good overview of what's in the rest of the report. And actually, like on page 6, gives a nice comparison of net position from one year to the next, which the financial statements themselves are only a single year, so the comparison is kind of a nice deal. But only a few things are really different this year compared to last year, I'd say, and that's the net pension asset that you had last year has become a net pension liability because of changes at PERS. We knew that was going to happen. We talked about this last year for those of you that were here last year. It went from $1.7 million as an asset to $4.9 million as a liability. PERS has issued their 6/30/16 report now, and the city reports a year behind, so the liability of 4.9 you're reporting in this report is really for 6/30/15. That's just the way this thing works. Kind of a weird deal. PERS just came out with their, like I say, 6/30/16, where their liability went from, I think it's 5.4. Actually, I think I have it. $5.7 million liability to a $15.0 billion liability. Billion. So if your share of that stays the same, which may or may not be true, that would work out your liability would go from that 4.9 up to like a $12.9 million liability. So it would increase like $8 million in this next year. So just something to be aware of that's coming down the pike. Now that's just for the entity-wide statements. It doesn't have anything to do with the budgetary statements. So it doesn't really affect your budgeting or anything. But just something to be aware of. In general, I'd say the city is in pretty good shape. I'm looking at this and comparing it to some other things. Your net position, that's monies that's available that you can spend, as opposed to the invested in capital assets, which isn't really spendable, or the restricted net position, which has, restrictions on it, of course, hence the catchy title. Your unrestricted net position is like $5.2 million, which I have a lot of clients, their unrestricted net position is not a positive number. And I looked at the city of Portland today just for comparison, just for fun. Their unrestricted net position is a deficit of $3.6 billion with a B dollars. So, relatively speaking, you're in good shape, I think.
Well, can we make note of that? That's just such good news.
Other than that, I'm not going to spend any time talking about the statements themselves unless somebody wants to or has a question about them, or the footnotes. The footnotes give a lot of additional information. It's all good information. It all needs to be in here, but I don't think there's anything really new and exciting this year as opposed to some previous years. Other than, I will say that sometimes the statement, footnote 11 is on a restatement. Sometimes you see that phrase restatement and you think, oh my gosh, we had to restate something's wrong or was wrong. No, that's not the case here. It's just there was a fund that you broke into two funds, so there's really no change other than taking something that was in one bucket and putting it into two other buckets, but the total amount didn't change at all. So that restatement footnote is just, it's explanatory, but it's nothing that exciting. So skipping ahead all the way to the next part that's mine, which, oops, my page isn't numbered, but I think it's 107. The independent auditor's report required by Oregon state regulations. The ORS require us to talk about certain things we look at, and there's a list of them: deposit of public funds, indebtedness limitations, etc. Again, shortcutting it, the good part is, in connection with our testing, nothing came to our attention that caused us to believe the city was not in substantial compliance, blah, 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 except for, and there were three over expenditures, which as an auditor I can't get too excited about. I know Debbie has some comments in her information about why those things occurred and what caused those. And that is the financial statements themselves. Now, there's some other letters that I'll talk about, but does anybody have any questions about the financial statements?
I'd just like to ask,
Sure.
why is it said generally accepted versus nationally required or statewide? Why is it specifically said generally accepted?
That is actually, that's the defined term. If you go to any, well, let's say the standards for governmental reporting set by the Governmental Accounting Standards Board, and then the AICPA, the American Institute of Certified Public Accountants, sets the language for auditor reporting. So generally accepted, it's accounting principles generally accepted in the United States of America.
Right, I saw that phrase over and over again.
It used to just be generally accepted accounting principles. There we go, GAAP.
Right.
Now the APGA-USA doesn't roll off the tongue as easily, so We still say gap, but yes, that's the phrase.
That is the
If
phrase.
you look at, I don't know, General Motors, IBM, anybody else that has, U.S. GAAP statements, that's the phrase you're going to see in the auditor report.
That makes more sense. I was like, well, is there, yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Anyone else? Please.
Thanks.
Okay, and then,
I have
Sorry,
just a short
sorry,
one.
Kip.
On the PERS liability, I'm not sure I understand the vehicle that we use to meet that liability. I'm not sure how that works. Can you explain that to me?
how you're going to meet that liability?
Yeah.
How does,
Well, it's a really good question. If I were to speak not as the auditor, but just as somebody who reads these numbers a lot, I would say the system as it currently stands is unsustainable. But that's not an official TKW position. That's just somebody looking at the PERS numbers. I think the state somehow is going to have to reform some things in ways that will pass muster in the courts. How you're going to go about meeting those liabilities, I mean, they are, some people will say those numbers, it's just a number, it doesn't mean anything. Well, that's not really true. I mean, in terms of your budget statements, it doesn't affect the budget statement, so it doesn't affect your current budgeting. And it's true you don't have to pay that number right now, today. It's going to be down the road. But what it means is your PERS rates, what you're going to be paying into PERS, are going to be increasing kind of as far as the eye can see, and at some point it's going to be pretty painful. It's not pretty painful already.
Yeah, I just couldn't understand how they're going to be paid, and it looks like it's going to keep getting worse.
Well, it may or may not keep getting worse. You don't know. I mean, one of the reasons it jumped so much this year is they've adjusted their assumed rates of investment income. You know, they used to assume, PERS used to assume an 8% investment return. If I could get 8% continuously, I'd probably be doing something other than what I'm auditing. Then they dropped it down a couple of years ago to 7.75, and then last January they dropped it to 7.5. And the change from 7.75 to 7.5 is one of the big reasons that it went from 5.7 to 15.0. Not the only reason, but it's a big chunk of it. Now, what you might wonder is 7.5 reasonable? And again, if I could get 7.5, I'd probably be doing something else. But historically, I mean, investment returns have been higher than what we're seeing currently. So, you know, what we've had for the last, 8 years since coming out of the recession, that doesn't mean that's what investment returns are going to be for the next 30, 50 years, which is really the time frame you're looking at when you're looking at these PERS liabilities. I mean, maybe investment returns are going to come back up. Maybe 7.5 is going to be too low. I don't know.
So have patience, because I'm not being critical. I'm just trying to understand. So where does the money come from to service the PERS liability? I mean, if we're not going to affect our budget, where's that money coming from?
Well, it does affect the budget in that your PERS contribution rates that you pay on the payroll is going to continue to increase. So it will affect the budget over time. I mean, ultimately the taxpayers are going to pay that money because there's no place else for it to come from. I don't know if I'm answering your question.
It answered it enough. Some of the haze is gone. So.
The liability is based on actuarial estimates that if everything stops right now, what will you have to pay out over the lifetime of everybody that is currently invested in the plan? So it's not that this liability is due in the next year or two. It's due over the next 30, 40 years. So, there is some time in there,
But the way it translates is really into your future budgets, and that, their payment of their retirement is based on two income sources, investment returns and contributions from the cities and the state government. If the investment returns drop, then the city's contributions have to go up. And so as we see increases in our liability amount, what it means is that future budgets, PERS contributions will have to increase, which means that increases our costs associated with our employees.
So when we get new PERS, so when we get new PERS people on board, are we still guaranteeing them an 8% return?
Well, the PERS program has changed quite a bit. So people hired after, and I forget the date, it's November something of some year. It's actually quite a fair distance back. Are not eligible for Tier 1 and Tier 2 anymore, which is the most expensive of the PERS benefits. So the new people coming on board have a much more limited pension benefit. So they're not really the issue. It's really the Tier 1, Tier 2 people that have been hired. But somebody can have a working career of 30 years, and then they can have a retired lifespan of could be another 30 years. So you're talking about a 60-year problem that really originated many years ago, and is we kind of I'd say blame the accountants because we didn't put a number. There was no reporting of this until just last year, so nobody really saw it, or people that did see it would be the people in PERS or there that would be looking at this and didn't raise any red flags or anything. So
yeah, I was reading an article by Phil Keesley, if you remember him, and there's an archive one I saw on the internet, and he predicted what was going to happen back then. That was a decade ago, maybe more than a decade ago.
Yeah.
Laid out exactly what was going to happen, and looks like it has.
If it's any consolation, Oregon is actually in much better shape than a lot of states. I mean, at least
Scary.
we've been making our PERS contributions and stuff. There are, Chicago or Illinois and New Jersey. I mean, there are places that have kind of skipped their contribution to PERS in favor of current spending, and those people are in much worse shape than Oregon is.
Thank you.
Questions?
Thank you. Sure. There are a couple other letters that I'm not sure what order they're in your packet. The longer one is under professional standards. There's what we would call required communications to those charged with governance, which is kind of a mouthful. We also shorten it to SAS 114. This letter goes through kind of our responsibilities and your responsibilities, management's responsibility, talks a little bit about the timing, scope of the audit, so forth, some significant accounting practices, just things that you as, again, those charged with governance should be aware of. Most of this year is, well, it's all good information, but it's not super exciting. There's nothing that I want to jump up and say, wave my hand and say, whoa, look at this. Uncorrected misstatements, nothing material. Internal control is the other letter. Not aware of any consultations with other accountants. Stuff coming down the pike, there is a statement for other post-employment benefits, which we usually call OPEB. The reporting for OPEB is going to be similar to the reporting for pensions starting 6/30/18. Debbie cries. It just means there will be a lot more information, and there will probably be another liability to go on the balance sheet. The other one that's going to be somewhat challenging, let's say, is the GASB, that's the Governmental Accounting Standards Board Statement 77 on tax abatement disclosures. That actually is in effect this year we're in right now. So 6/30/17, you'll have to report that. If there are tax abatements that either you have entered into or other governments that somehow would affect your tax collections have entered into. And think the accountants and the assessors are still trying to figure out how to gather that information, get all that information together, because it's really not easily accessible at this point. It includes a copy of the management representation letter. This is the letter that we make Ron and Debbie sign where they swear to give us their firstborn if they've lied to us in any way. Any questions about that? I'll go on to the other letter, the last letter, which is a page and less than a half. This one is the letter on internal control. We go through a lot of stuff here and we define kind of what we're talking about. We have 3 levels of deficiencies accountants do that we talk about. There's control deficiencies, which are, we saw something, we'll probably talk to Debbie about it, or maybe Ron, and say, you ought to look at this and fix this. But it's not a big deal. And there's kind of the next level up, which we call a significant deficiency, which is important enough that we think we should call it to your attention. But it's not nearly as bad as what we call a material weakness, which is kind of our highest level of red flag, where we say, you really have to pay attention to this and this needs to get fixed. So this year we had a couple of significant deficiencies. Control over year-end cutoff, there was underreported revenue, and it's been an ongoing thing, and Debbie will address it and has some written things. But I wouldn't call it a big deal. I'd say it wasn't technically correct, but it's kind of a similar to the utility billing policy that a lot of people face. As long as you get 12 months worth of expense or revenue in a year, maybe don't worry if there's some cutoff lap, if that makes sense. That's kind of the case here, where it was some revenue. Actually, you had some additional revenue that could have been accrued or should have been accrued technically, but you did get 12 months of revenue recorded in the year. So,
and I'm sorry, you said something right at the beginning. Uncut author? Uncut? What was the word? It was...
I got cold medicine kicking in again.
Yeah, no, but you said...
I'm sorry.
Yeah. No, you said something right at the beginning. You said uncut author? I didn't understand the term. Or
It might have been a cutoff period.
Oh,
No,
maybe
no.
talking about cutoff?
Maybe I missed it. Never mind.
I don't know. I was probably mumbling.
I'll watch the tape.
Sorry.
Okay.
I'm probably talking and then turn it away and you can't hear me. And
It's
so
okay.
I'll try. The other one was some missing invoices that, shouldn't happen, but when you deal with the volume of business that the city does, I guess it's not all that surprising that it could happen once or twice that an invoice goes AWOL. And again, I know Debbie's going to talk about it. So. But those are the only things in the letter. Oh, no, I take that back. The last thing, and the last thing is about these meetings, is the written minutes are really late, or at least were at the time of our audit, and that really should be addressed and should get more current.
Well, I believe Ron has addressed that.
We are in the process of, first of all, catching up, but then also ensuring that we do not fall behind again.
Thank you for bringing that up. I appreciate that.
One more comment. I believe significant deficiency does require us to come back with a resolution on how I plan to address that. I might note that last year we had, between urban renewal and the city, we had 3 deficiencies. They were not these 3. There were 3 other ones, which are no longer on our report. So we did correct the ones that we had last year. So I will be coming back with a resolution addressing these 3 and how we plan to not have them again in the future.
Well, and Ron, so since now the minutes issue is falling into the finance department, is there any resources that can be drawn from there to help the city recorder?
Well, yes, in a certain sense. One of the things that we've done there are several factors that led to us falling behind. One of those has been just trying to stay up on top of some records requests. Recently, there was a records request that constituted 10,000 pages of review that our staff had to go through. And so I have already authorized that when we run across that we either hire a temp to come in and help, or for part-time employees that may have this kind of experience, that we increase their hours without getting us into the benefit portion. So yes, the short answer is yes, those are the couple of things that we've implemented to try to correct this.
Okay. Councilor Hoagland, you have a question? Thanks. Is that it?
If there's no other questions, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Good to see everybody again, and see you again next year.
Very thorough report, and thank you very much
Thanks a lot.
for helping us. Okay, public hearing, public comment. We're going to do the public hearing to obtain citizen comment on proposed ordinance 2017-01, which is established as a procedure and delegates to the city manager the sale of a class of real property interests.
Your Honor, we don't have a script, but
Yeah.
essentially, if you would please just open the public hearing and ask if anyone is here to comment on the draft ordinance.
Okay, the hearing is now open. Anyone here to comment? Seeing none. I'm sorry.
If you want to close the hearing, and we'll proceed with the ordinance when we get to it.
Move to close?
Second.
Motion and a second to close the hearing. Any discussion? Hearing none. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Hearing none. Motion carries.
Your Honor, I think the next item is another public hearing that needs to be continued.
Right, public hearing, we've got the request to continue to February 13th, 2017, an appeal/call of a planning commission decision change to non-conforming use, applicant Mike and Lila Bradley, the Beach Club Event Center. Those are requests to continue to February 13th.
I'd move to grant the request of continuing this public hearing until February 13th, 2017, at this place and time.
Second it.
Motion and a second. Any discussion?
I would like to. Why are we extending it?
I can answer. This item was continued, actually it was called up by the city council, and then the applicant made a application for a rezone, which would basically replace this item. That rezone was approved, but the LUBA appeal period, according to LUBA, at about 4 o'clock today, no appeal had been filed on the rezoning, but they said best wait till Wednesday in case it was mailed. So the applicant would withdraw this, but for the fact we don't know for sure that no appeal has been filed.
Anyone else? All right, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Hearing none, motion carries. All right, ordinances. Ordinance number 201701. Would you please read?
Yes, I'll do the reading, and then I'll give you a brief staff report. Council, this is first reading of an ordinance of ordinance 2017-01, an ordinance amending the Lincoln City Municipal Code, Title 4, Real Property, adding a new Chapter 4.05, Grant of Temporary Easements and Licenses, delegating to the city manager the authority to grant temporary easements and licenses subject to land use permitting. So that would be the first reading. The ordinance that you have before you, if you'd like, you can do first and second this evening. If not, you have the option to continue and do the second reading at your next meeting, which will be February 13th. The ordinance is kind of routine in the sense that Oregon statutes authorize 221-727 authorizes the adoption of an ordinance that would allow the city manager, or would allow this kind of delegation where the city council wouldn't have to have an individual public hearing on every temporary easement that we granted. So, for example, If the city chooses to grant an easement, an interest in land to someone, you have to have an individual advertised public hearing, 221-725, where you have staff present an analysis of whether or not the easement would further the public interest or whether or not the property is not necessary for public use. Because it's an interest in land, you have to have that hearing. So you've had several of these over the past couple of years where you have 221-725 hearings before the council on some things that are rather routine. So about 2 or 3 years ago, we did an ordinance that delegated to the city manager to get rid of certain easements that encroached on property. So let's say there was an old pedestrian access easement across your lot, and it led to nowhere because the property that maybe at the time the plat was granted, they thought, well, it would be nice to have an easement going back to here, and then whatever was planned never happened. So if you have basically an easement that goes nowhere, we created a process where you could petition the city manager, and without having to come to the council, he could extinguish those easements. That's because that's a certain class of applications, and there were certain parameters created. One of the things that came up recently is there was some discussion about ODOT needed to get a temporary construction easement on some city property because they have a project, I think it may even be the D River project, that they're going to need some land to either store their construction equipment, or they need to physically be on our land in order to reach over and work on the bridge. And so they wanted a temporary construction easement. Well, that means we have to come back to you with a 221-725 public hearing to determine whether or not to grant the easement. Another related issue was licenses, where you have the Disc Golf Club would like to enter onto the city-owned village's property and construct, in accordance with approved plans, a disc golf course. Well, if you wanted to give them permission, there's no public hearing required, but it's very similar to granting someone a construction easement. So this ordinance includes licenses as well as easements to go through the same process, which doesn't involve you, frankly. It's delegated to the city manager. But we thought we'd give the manager some parameters in order to determine whether or not to grant those. And so the class of property interests that we're asking about delegating to the city manager is temporary construction easements, temporary easements. Construction easements are an example. In addition, we would delegate to the manager to do temporary licenses, and I define that as 12 months or less. So if ODOT needs a temporary construction easement to set up on city property and work on the adjacent right-of-way belonging to ODOT, that could be done through the manager after he makes certain required findings consistent with Chapter 271. It wouldn't have to come to you. Now, the same process would be followed, although not required by state statute. The same process would be required if the manager wanted to grant a temporary license, a revocable license, to someone like the Disc Golf Club that would enter onto our property and construct pursuant to permits an improvement or an amenity. The catch is, and I know this is important, so I'm going to stress it, the catch is you don't get a temporary construction easement or a temporary license unless you've got all the appropriate land use approvals. You can't enter onto our property and alter our land. While there has been an interpretation by the planning department that it is actually by the planning commission, that construction staging is a permitted use in all zones, it's probably not true in open space. And the code really needs to be amended to clarify that. But moreover, if there's a wetland or a riparian corridor or some other protected land, you're not going to be authorized with a construction easement or a license to go alter that land. You're going to it's all subject to land use approval. So the catch on this is managers delegated the authority. He's got to make findings in accordance with Chapter 271 of the Oregon statutes. It's either not necessary for public use or it furthers the public interest to do this, plus it's subject to land use permitting with some need to clarify in our land use code exactly whether or not construction staging is permitted in all zones like open space and parks comes to mind. There was one catch that your planning department had, and I gave you just some language, and I'll read it. And I'll read it first and then explain. On page 5, paragraph 7 would have the following language added. Notwithstanding the above limitations, a temporary license may automatically renew without a new application, such as a revocable license authorizing an encroachment, providing all payments are made as required. Your planning staff pointed out that we currently license, again, this is an easement, this is a license, we currently license encroachments. So you may have a porch that encroaches on city right-of-way. And if you have that, we catch that encroachment, and we know about it, you pay the city a license fee every year to legally encroach onto the right-of-way. We don't like to do this, but we also don't like to tell people to cut off the front of their porch. So you have a procedure where the planning department has a formula. They calculate how much the rent is for the license, and that is charged every year. So this ordinance, the way I originally drafted it, would not cover those licenses because they're revocable. They can be revoked if we decide to revoke it, but they would exceed the 12-month limitation. So the language I just read would delegate to the city manager the ability to do those encroachments, authorize them with a standard license agreement without having to come to you. So again, I want to back up a little bit, this is the administration of what is a larger issue of right-of-way management. And Mr. Chandler and I talked about the fact that we feel comfortable delegating to the manager certain administrative type decisions like this. The larger issue of right-of-way management should be addressed by the council. We do not have a very good or thorough right-of-way management ordinance. It is on our list of things to do, and both your public works staff and your manager have talked about fleshing that out as to what is the appropriate use of city right-of-way. Oftentimes there's a difference based upon what zone you might be in, so there's a tie-in with planning, but I don't want to give you the impression this is somehow a solution to all the right-of-way management issues. This is just a discrete issue. You're specifically authorized by statute to create a class of property interests and say this class of property interests doesn't deserve or necessitate individual hearings. So a temporary construction easement doesn't rise to the level of requiring a full-blown hearing for each one that gets approved. This class could be handled through a delegation to the manager. So that's the summation. If you wish to proceed, I'd ask for approval of first reading with the changes as read. And if you would like to proceed, you can do the second reading if it's unanimous, or you can continue second reading to the next meeting.
The new addition, almost a paragraph that was given to us tonight. Other people haven't had a chance to review it, so I'm not sure we can go forward. But the other thing about that is it says a temporary license, like you suggested, like maybe it's a porch or a deck or whatever that's encroaching, and that they pay the fee one time, and then
Well, actually, though, they have an annual fee.
an annual fee.
Yes, it says required, provided all payments are made.
So does that go with the land? I mean, if there's a new owner? And
No, those are required to be addressed. In fact, a couple of years ago, we almost revoked one, and we told them we're going to have you cut off your porch or you need to start paying on this. We had somebody basically start to get into a foreclosure situation, so they made arrangements with the person that was buying to get a new agreement and pay. So with regard to the added language, the reason why we have the option in the council communication to do first reading this time, then you could set second reading for your next meeting, and that would give anyone who's listening the opportunity to come in and comment before the second reading. And typically, we say submit written comments by the Wednesday before the next meeting. So if you wish to do that, you could do that as part of your approval of first reading.
Questions, is now the time?
Good, now we go during discussion time. Okay, so I guess we're still looking for a motion here.
I'd move to approve ordinance number 2017-01.
So first reading?
First reading.
I'll second it.
Motion and a second, discussion? Councilor Hinton?
Okay, and I have three things. One is on PDF page 57, if you're reading along that way, and it says that the construction staging is permitted use in all zones. And I just want to state out loud, I disagree with that. I'd like to know, for example, open spaces, I wouldn't think that would be available for staging, so I'd like a little more specificity about which zones we're talking about. And then on PDF page 63, that's for the appeals, and it states that the only person who can appeal is the applicant, and I'm not real comfortable with that, because what if there's something of a particular space that's going to be used for a staging area, let's say, isn't known or is only known to somebody who lives close by, or whatever. Anyway, just a question if we're being broad enough with the ability to appeal. And also on page 63, I would rather hear, this is about the updates, the report to council about these staging areas or whatever they are, that if they could be more often, like perhaps quarterly, so we can kind of keep track of where we are. And I have a question about how the $250 fee was established, and how do we know that that's equitable?
Who would you like to address the $250?
I'd like to start. With regard to the first question, yes, the council communication does point out that there was an interpretation by the Planning Commission that construction staging is permitted in all zones. It actually is a Planning Commission Resolution 2002-02. I did note, however, that Oregon Law 227-186 sub 2, which was adopted in 1999, requires that all land use rules be done by ordinance. So a resolution of the Planning Commission in 2002 is not an ordinance. So my suggestion is that the council or the planning director initiate on his own motion an amendment to the code to clarify whether or not construction staging is a permitted use in all zones, and I would suspect that open space probably is not going to be when that is processed. So I think the cure for your concern is to just ask for a motion to direct staff to address construction staging as a permitted use in all zones. Secondly, the reason why I think this ordinance, which is modeled on the earlier ordinance from two or 3 years ago, restricts appeal is that, remember, the issue is subject to land use approvals. So if you have to go to, let's say, for example, you want to get a temporary license to enter onto the village's property and construct a disc golf course, the appropriate time to appeal and the appropriate approval to appeal is the land use decision approving it as an authorized use. That's the appeal, not the grant of a temporary license. So that license is just something, it's the permission and the hold harmless. The real issue where the concerns would come in, I believe, would be the land use approval, which is a separate matter. So that's the reason for that. The reporting period for the manager, I think, like the prior ordinance, it had a yearly annual reporting of when he's exercised this authority. If you'd like to change that, it's up to you. It's just simply what we've used in the past. And the $250 is pretty much on the low end of application fees for processing and routing this kind of an application. So if you recall in the land use codes, typically we can't exceed for the first appeal $250. So I think when the first one was done a couple of years back, that was used as the measure. We typically are not recovering our costs, but we are at least having a nominal fee so that there's not frivolous appeals.
Ron, I have a question then for you, or I guess it's for Mr. Apichello too, of if we're going to grant the city manager this authority and without a public hearing, and then sensitive to what Councilor Hinton was saying, is there a certain trigger? Say we get 1, 2, 3 inquiries or complaints that would bring it to our attention, and with the possibility of revocation or amending?
Well, there's a couple of triggers. And the appeal itself is a trigger. If somebody is displeased with the decision, then they have the ability to appeal that decision. By me reporting it, if you find that there is a problem within the way it's being administered, then you are going to be getting that information and you would be able to review it. Now, on a broader sense, let me come back to something that Mr. Apichello talked about, and that is the development of a land use or this kind of a policy. When we spoke about this earlier and discussed the licensing in particular, I'm fine with that authority being delegated as long as I have the policy that has been established by you that gives me the parameters with which I need to work. That is not yet formalized. And so what we discussed was to make sure that we as a staff then bring back to you some policy options that you can review so that as I go forth and receive these kind of applications, I'm able to work within the policy that you have established.
And I guess what I'm after within this is because if we're going to do the appeal early in the planning stage, everything looks great on paper. Everyone says, yes, we're going to do what we say we're going to do. And then we see, like we had with the project near Schooner Creek a while ago, the staging area becomes a disaster zone. And then you start having complaints. And so that's kind of what I was addressing, not at that stage, but afterwards. What leeway do we have to control that?
There's a couple things built into the ordinance to address these issues. First, the manager could take a request and say, this is too sensitive. I'm going to send it to the city council. So he can, and he has the authority to simply punt and send it to you. Although I don't expect that he would do that because, again, the real issues are the land use issues, and there is a very well-established appeal process for land use decisions. So if, using the disc golf course, if someone objects to the disc golf course going onto the village's property, the appropriate time to raise your objections would be during the Planning Commission hearing on the master plan revision or the final plan revision for that project, because two processes, land use processes, had to be taken in order to authorize that, and it's still not done. There's still another construction plan approval process that needs to go forward. So in terms of physically altering the land and doing the kind of things that usually draw appeals, you have all that land use process in place. What this is about is whether or not, after those land use approvals are obtained, they have to come to you and have a hearing about granting them the authority to enter onto the property and do the work. And so the catch in the ordinance is they have obtained all required permits. So we're not giving them the license, and we're not going to give anybody a construction easement if they haven't got all the permitting done. If they don't have the permitting done and all the appeals are exhausted, they just don't get it. But this, you don't have to come to you and have a public hearing after all that stuff is done.
If I may, Mr. Mayor, I'd like to just tag on to what the mayor said, though. What you're talking about is a process early on, and I think what he was talking about was, okay, their equipment's out there, they've got stuff strewn all over, it's not safe or attractive, if a construction and staging area can be attractive, but, and so at that point, what?
Well, again, this is a license agreement or a temporary construction easement. Those have terms and conditions. They say keep the site clean. Those agreements, and to the extent we've had bad experiences, we can learn from that by our standard license agreements would say whether or not you're authorized to do anything, and whether or not what kind of construction controls you want to keep in place. So if you're constructing disc golf, no, you're not allowed to drive heavy equipment into the village's preservation areas. You can, number one, there's built-in controls because you can only do things in accordance with approved plans and permits. And number two, we have a written agreement. We can flesh out any concerns, and we can learn from bad experiences and fold that in.
Mr. Mayor, just as a follow-up on that, whether the agreement is approved by me or by you, what you're describing is something that happens after the agreement has been approved. And those remedies are for what Mr. Rappacello just discussed. It's on the administration of the agreement, not the initial issuing of the agreement. So whether it's approved by me or whether it's approved by you, the process after it's been approved would be the same.
Right, and I'm not going to keep beating this dead horse. What we're saying, though, is we're not going to have these people in front of us. They're not going to be in front of the public stating their case. They're just going to be in an office with you basically saying, here's what I promised to do.
Yes.
That there's a difference, and that's all we're concerned about is that accountability after the fact. Yeah. And then also, again, to what Councilor Hinton was asking for, I would be very comfortable with updates. You know, hey, we granted these. Here's where it's going to happen. Here's what they're thinking of doing. It's better about knowing that because I'm going to get the phone calls.
Sure.
What I was thinking, too.
Yeah. All right.
Somebody else?
That's fine.
There goes Skip.
Somebody go.
Mine's the quickest. So, Mr. Rappacello, I might have heard it wrong, but if a person, for example, had a deck that encroached on city property, they would have to get a license for that encroachment?
Well, we've used it for encroachments in right-of-way, to my knowledge. I don't know that we've done any for encroachments on the city fee-owned property. But I know that the planning department has processed at least two, and they've come to the council, and the council has approved a license which said, no, you don't have to tear your deck off, but you must pay, based on this formula, $300-some-odd a year.
Yeah, and that's not a lot of money, but didn't you say that we lose money on that?
Well, no, what I was referring to earlier was in terms of the application fee question, about $250. Generally, it doesn't take very long, especially when you have an attorney involved, to eat up an application fee by processing it. So that was my comment about we're losing money. Generally, we don't recover our costs when we process applications. You can only just think back a few months to the St. James Santiago project.
Counselor?
The length of time to approve or deny the request, is there a specific time frame for those requesting that?
I guess I'm not a big fan of putting internal timetables in. It's like in land use, you have a 120-day rule to get your application approved by the final city decision maker. I didn't put in a control. If you'd like, I can explore, but this is basically a burden on the city manager to process it. If he wants to volunteer a certain time frame to produce a report by within 30 days of the application or something like that, he could. I wasn't going to just do it, but we really didn't have that discussion. I just figured it would be processed in a reasonable period of time.
Also, for those that wish to appeal, if it is only the applicant, or if it's somebody else, is there a fee associated with the appeal? And if it's within a certain time frame, could there not be a fee or something like that?
I think that was a $250 appeal fee.
Oh, that was I thought it was the application fee.
Well, actually, the appeal relates to, it throws you into Chapter 1.26, which is the Uniform Administrative Appeals Ordinance. So I believe that ordinance says we establish by resolution appeal fees. So you probably just pointed out we have some follow-up to do in establishing a fee, and I know that the uniform fee resolution is due back before you, I think, next month.
And lastly, it says that the manager shall require sign-off by the Lincoln City Planning Department, Public Works Department, and City Attorney. It doesn't say an individual or a department head or a specific person, just that department. And if it isn't signed off by one of those three entities, what would be the case? And would the applicant have already been approved by those departments, and then it gets signed off by the department to go to the manager? Or is it at each step it could be denied by one of those three and also denied by the city manager?
I think what that is to make sure that it's reviewed by those responsible. So what I would review for would be whether or not it's in the appropriate legal form. What Public Works would review for is whether or not all the required permits were obtained. And I didn't say Public Works Director or her designee, city attorney or designee, but it's kind of implied by just referring to the department.
Sign-off may have been the wrong term, because that implies approval. The decision-making approval on this is the city manager, and so the departments, as Mr. Apocello mentioned, are reviewing it with recommendations.
So it could be department approval, not a sign-off.
No, I wouldn't put approval. I would put review and recommendation.
And then the last one would be if all three of those have been signed off, is it an automatic sign-off by the city manager?
No.
No.
I can explore language about departmental review and recommendation for the next reading, if you'd like to do that. But I would recommend that if you approve first reading, I know you have a motion to approve first reading, you should make another motion to set second reading for February 13th. And I'll make those changes.
Okay, so, you had a question?
I just had a comment about the timeliness of the report, and I'd like to see it monthly or quarterly rather than biannually.
That's the what is coming up.
I can explore language for that with the manager.
So then I guess I just want to make sure I'm clear where we're at in the motion. We were just approving the first reading, but do we have to have a second one for the changes we discussed? Or
I think if you were to approve first reading this evening and set second reading for February 13th, and I will take your comments And I will write them up in a council communication and say, if you were to impose a time limit on the city manager, he'd be agreeable to X number of days. And then if you like that language, I'll read it next meeting.
Okay. Councilman, you got your hand up?
I just want to clarify first and second reading, as this is my first and second reading on council.
Just the charter provides that we can conduct a reading of an ordinance by title only, and that, and that's what, I've read the title, but that you must conduct 2 separate readings of the ordinance, and if the vote is not unanimous, you may not do 2 readings at the same meeting. But so you must read the ordinance twice by title only, unless one of you says, please read the entire ordinance, and then if that passes, then I'd have to read the whole thing, and then you're going to need some more coffee. But basically, the ordinance adoption procedure is 2 readings. Usually, for routine matters, we can get 2 readings done, typically with a unanimous vote on first and proceed directly to second. But where we're either interested in additional public comment, or we have some helpful suggestions, as we've had this evening, we usually say approve first reading, set second reading for February 13th, and request the submission of written comments on the ordinance by noon on February 8th, I guess, would be the Wednesday before the Monday meeting. We typically do that, and we've done that as a kind of almost standard procedure, unless it was very, very routine and didn't have any input. So,
Councilor, I've used the procedure to have a second reading when I didn't have a chance to read the first one at all. And so I was the lone no vote, and since we weren't unanimous, it would go to a second reading, which gives you time to catch up. Yeah, so don't ever hesitate. It's to say, I didn't have time, no, and it'll be brought up to you again. Okay, so we're good to go with the motion and second that was given.
I just one real quick thing for Richard. I don't want to take up any time. And it's kind of attached to this. How do we stop ourselves or help ourselves from going on kind of these wild rides that we've gone on for easements? We spend a tremendous amount of money, and it's just a loss. Do we are you crafting anything to remedy that?
I think that recently we did a whole lot of work, and then nothing came of it, and that was because I believe council said, sure, we'll initiate the application for you, and because you did that, you did not get to charge the $800 application fee. So I think that probably the prudent, although probably unpopular answer would be to not initiate changes and say there's a code, there's a process, and unfortunately there's an application fee to help us recover costs.
Okay, so end of discussion? Can I just do it all in favor, or do I got to have a roll call on this one? Roll call, please. I'll try an ordinance.
Mayor Williams.
Yes.
Dick Anderson.
Yes.
Riley Hoagland.
Yes.
Deanna Hinton.
Yes.
Susan Walke.
Yes.
And Kip Ward.
Yes.
Motion carried.
And we did determine it would be the February 13th for the second reading, you said?
Well,
Your
actually,
Honor,
you haven't done that, but someone should make that motion.
I move to set the second reading for February 13th, 2017, and accept written comments until noon on February 8th, 2017.
Second?
Motion and a second. Any discussion?
And that's with the revisions that we've suggested. Does that
Hopefully.
need to be?
They'll be, I'll give you the options, and you can read them at the next time.
Any further discussion? Hearing none. Do I need a roll call again on that? No. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Hearing none, motion carries. Thank you very much. All right. Resolutions, none. Special order of business, appointment to Parks Board, one vacancy for city resident position with term expiring on 12/31/2019. Two applicants, Deanna Dunn and Jill Smith.
Your Honor,
Yes.
I had the opportunity to interview Ms. Smith, and I moved to appoint her to the Parks Board for a term expiring on 12/31/2019.
Motion, any second? Second. Motion and a second, discussion. Was Ms. Dunn interviewed?
No, she was currently serving, or was serving, so
Okay, maybe I'm
Kathy.
missing
Her
something.
term just
It says
expired.
one vacancy, 2 applicants.
Yes. Her term expired on December 31st. Deanna Dunn. She's asking to be reappointed, and so she's already gone through the background process.
Okay, so we're not filling her position, we're filling a vacancy on top of that.
Her position, hers is the only vacant
Okay, but
position.
she's reapplied for it.
Yes.
I just
and
want to know,
her-
am I considering them both tonight?
Yes, you're considering both applicants for the position.
Okay, okay,
2 people for 1 position.
right. And so Ms. Dunn already occupies that position, but her term expires on the 31st of 2016, correct? Yes, correct. Okay, so she has reapplied. Counselor Walkie has interviewed Ms. Smith, has recommended her, but I don't know if that's not a recommendation for Ms. Dunn either, so I guess it's up to us to discuss that at this point. Am I clear on that, or no? Okay. Microphone, thank you.
Ms. Walkie, do you know who the other interviewer, was it one of the counselors that's already gone? I thought.
I believe Mr. Norakis
Okay.
interviewed her also.
So the discussion then
Is there input from the rest of the committee commission that the individuals who have their term ended, is there any kind of feedback to see how that person was during their time? Me, not having interviewed either of these individuals, nor seen what Ms. Dunn has done, have no information of her, and don't feel I can fully vote for one or the other. Susan recommends Ms. Smith, and I understand that, she's interviewed her and suggested, but I have, this application for Ms. Dunn is 2 years old, so it doesn't even show that she was on there. So if you guys had not said she was on that committee, I would not have known that she was on the Parks Committee.
Okay. Then you'd prefer to have some time to review? You've got that right to ask for that.
I mean, I don't know either of these individuals, and her application hasn't shown what she has done while she was on the Parks Department Board, or Parks Board. So
I guess the question is, because this is going to come up repeatedly, where we just have 1 or 2 counselors interviewing, where you're not really going to get to know these people. And so the question has to be asked, how would you like that to be resolved? How would you like to be informed about these people?
Specifically, if they are a person who was on that board and whose term has expired, and they are submitting their application to do it again, update their resume or update their application to show that they have spent this time and these are the things that they did.
I would say exactly the same thing, because it doesn't reflect what they're able or capable or have done. And I don't know either women. I have no idea how to vote.
Right, and
Only
that's-
1 interview for 2 people, even though 1 person's already serving. It doesn't give us anything. It doesn't give me anything to go on, except for what Susan has
Right, and that's kind of
gained
that
from
trust
1
factor, where we just have to say, okay, the counselor
I certainly-
volunteered to do this, and
Yeah, and I would say I'd certainly trust the person who does the interviewing.
That's what
If 2 people had been interviewed and not just 1, because then what experience has, or what knowledge has Susan gained from the other woman and what she has done? So it's, to me, not kind of a balanced approach, so I would have to abstain. I just don't know.
well, you don't want to abstain, you don't have to vote for it.
I'm not saying no, because I don't know.
Well, but that's an okay thing to say, too. It's not a problem to say no.
Mr. Mayor, typically, and again, this is the same question that asked last meeting, what way are we going to handle committees? And we've elevated the planning commission a little higher, as I've recognized in public interviews. The idea of having two counselors interview all candidates was to get a couple of, different opinions, or same, but visiting with all applicants. So I would, again, suggest that, if our policy is, to just hold this one in abeyance, find someone else, ask Councilor Walkie to also interview the other candidate, find somebody else on the council that would like to interview the two candidates, and do that. And then I'm comfortable with their recommendation after everybody's been interviewed. But I think that's the only, it's broken down tonight because of only one person.
Would
And
either of you be interested at this point in doing that, or both of you, or?
Sure, I would.
Who has been appointed to interview Parks Board applicants?
Do you remember that, Kathy?
Yeah, maybe we need to get that republished. Okay, so does that work for you then? Work that out with the city recorder to...
Well, if there, did you say that there wasn't?
Mr. Mayor, let me
Yes.
make a suggestion on
Yes,
that.
please.
We will check to find out who the other person was that counselor that volunteered to interview for these, and inform that counselor, if there isn't one, then we'll ask Counselor Hinton to.
And then perhaps work something into our system. I don't know if you need a vote from us to do it, but anytime someone carries on, rolls over, whatever we want to say, reapplies to the position they're in, that perhaps we do get an updated.
We're in the process of updating on that policy, so we'll make sure we address that.
Okay, so then,
Mr. Mayor, just a thought. That sounds simple and nice to update application. You've been serving for a year or two, and to be asked to fill out a form again, that's the whole reason of the interview. I would suggest that you perhaps offer it up if the person wants to, but not necessarily need it. Because quite frankly, I've had people call and say, I'm on it, or I've got an application in with the city. Could you change the box at the top, scratch out parks, and put me to budget? It's the same information. It doesn't ask what you've done.
It's not the same information.
Again, the interview should take care of that issue, but, I'm all for cut the paperwork. And to ask a citizen to volunteer anyway, if they want to really campaign for the job, that's one thing. But again, knowing you're going to be interviewed, you'd push it. But I'll tell you, you'll get people calling you and asking you, do I have to fill out another application?
Right. However, Ms. Dunn was not interviewed. And it wasn't
I understand. That's
updated.
where this fell down.
Yeah.
And secondarily.
hey guys, just real quick, I'm sorry, this is a procedural thing, and I enjoy a wide-ranging argument, but we still follow the rules of getting the attention of the chair, and then the chair will recognize you, and then we'll have a discussion, so we don't go free-for-all on us here. So, Councilor Hinton.
Thank you. Sorry about that. I would just like us to remember, too, that when Bruce Robinson put in his application past the time of everybody else, but his wasn't updated either. It didn't show that he had served on the Planning Commission. It didn't show that he was chair of the Planning Commission. It didn't show other things that he possibly had done over the last 2 years or however long it had been for him. And it's not a good representation of him to those of us who are reading the applications and trying to find out.
So perhaps just a supplementary.
It could be, just what's
Supplementary
happened
page, so you don't have to rewrite everything, but you could
It's only 2 pages.
date, address, and any relevant, yeah. I got to agree with Councilor Anderson. I would be, I'm going, look, I'm volunteering, why are you asking me to do more stuff? Because I hate paperwork more than anyone. But I do see the point that I think it is, I think it is needed to update. So some kind of supplementary application. This is all good information. It hasn't changed. But hey, what have you been doing for the last 2 years? Would be handy to know. Anyone else? Okay, so are we going to stick with the motion, or are we going to yank it and, or just
If
let it
nobody
die?
seconded, it
I
dies.
think it did get seconded.
Didn't, I don't think.
Yeah, I think it did get a
Yeah, I
second.
thought it had a
so-
second, too.
Oh, okay.
We were in a discussion phase, so, well, then maybe we should all just vote and say no and start it over again. But I don't want to discourage this person. I don't want to say no. Perhaps a withdrawal, yes.
I don't believe I have a second on that.
Okay, then it died for want of a second.
Okay.
Well, I'm going to say, are we going to allow it to die for want of a second? And then we'll re-examine, and who's going to get in touch? Who's going to handle this?
Kathy's going to check and if.
You'll take care of it.
Somebody else.
Oh, okay. All right.
And I guess I will contact Deanna and interview her. Is that the wish of the council?
I think that's a good idea.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, appointment to Visitor and Convention Committee for city resident lodging position with term expiring 11/5/2017. One applicant, Cami Lupinacci.
Lupinacci.
Lupinacci. That was our interview, wasn't it?
Yes.
Yes. You go ahead.
I move to appoint Cami Lupinacci to the Visitor and Convention Committee for the city resident lodging position with the term expiring on 11/5/2017.
Second that.
Motion to second, any discussion? I'll just say, I think we are, and I don't mean because I didn't say this about anyone else tonight, we will be greatly benefited by having Cami on board. She brought a lot of excitement to the interview, going to bring a lot of skills, and I'm really looking forward to hearing her input. Any other discussion?
I believe we have 2 vacant lodging positions, and I'm glad we are filling one of them.
Absolutely. Okay, then all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Hearing none, motion carries. Welcome aboard, Mrs. Lupinacci. Lupinacci, I'm so sorry. It's not the night to be trying to do this stuff. Okay, we're on to 16. I'm at. Are we actually done? City manager, city attorney reports?
Nothing.
Oh, my goodness. Actions, if any, based on executive session, we had none. Did I skip
Excuse
something?
me, Your Honor. Mr. Chandler, could I have some feedback on how often you feel those license reports should be?
The easements,
Yeah. Do you think?
temporary easements, I would not do it more than quarterly.
Okay.
I've got a tickle file that reminds me when things are due. I don't anticipate there's a lot of these that will come about, and so quarterly is probably sufficient.
Okay. Thank you for that input.
Okay. Additional comments from citizens present on non-agenda items?
Georgia Roloff, 1142 Northeast Lakewood. There's a project that seems to have gone dormant. The sidewalk project on West Devils Lake Road, south of the hospital, is, when I read about it, they said they were going to be done in February. Have they run into problems?
Mr. Mayor, would you like me to ask, I'm going to ask Mrs. Bradley to come up and address this.
Was that the only question for tonight?
It was.
Okay. Well, thanks, Lila. We'll jump right up here and answer it.
Thank you. The project is on delay for some materials that they have on order, and so we're still expecting them to be completed in March. So it's just delayed for material. As soon as they get that material, they'll be back in action and get it put together.
Okay, no increase in price because of the
No,
delays.
no. I've had a couple things on that, but
Satisfactory? All right, thank you. Anyone else? Seeing none, moving on. Announcements or comments by City Council? Councilor Anthony.
I just wanted to say, and I should have said this earlier, just about the audit, to thank Debbie and staff for putting in, I'm sure, was a lot of time and effort into trying to get all the info gathered for that audit. But I just want to say thank you to her and them.
What else? I have one quick, go ahead.
I just wanted to say that Councilor Anderson and I attended the Farm to Forest tour that was held on Friday, January 20th, that was put on by the Lincoln County Farm Bureau, the Oregon Small Woodlands Association, and industry professionals, coordinated by the Oregon State University Extension Service. It was very informative.
I hear something down there?
I do have something. My observation, this is from another city, but states that the Advisory Commission and board members shall not endorse in their official capacity any commercial product or enterprise. And I would like to see that here on this council with all of our councilors and mayor. And that's to ensure the public confidence. All members of advisory commissions and boards must be independent, impartial, responsible, and not use their position for personal gain or to benefit or harm others. And
Are we discussing my shirt?
exactly.
Okay, and I had brought this up, and I'd asked Kathy about this before, and she said, well, you can't even see it on the camera, because otherwise I got to change from work. And so,
I saw it from the camera.
oh, well, I've asked. I'm more than comfortable putting a piece of tape over it. But thank you for bringing it up.
I will be working on the uniform boards and commissions, as you were just discussing, the appointment process, and so I can use language like that, and you guys can debate it later.
Totally comfortable. Yes.
Do you want to go before me?
I already did.
Okay. Couple things. Mr. Chandler, do we get new shirts this year?
New shirts.
Oh, yes. I haven't ordered them yet.
You're
Yes,
past
we
due.
will. We're past due.
No
Thank you for reminding
gray
me.
ones.
What's that?
No gray.
Those are the ones that you can wear to endorse the city.
That's fine.
Thank you for the reminder.
And then my last little dibble, I would like to thank Councilors Hoagland and Hinton for the additional spirited debate. It's quite a pleasure. So thank you.
We count on it.
I know.
Yes.
I didn't receive a gray long sleeve shirt last year, and I would
We
like
will
one of
correct
those
that
if
one
you're
as well.
reordering. Thank you.
Well, she didn't see one, I didn't get one either.
Okay, then I had a follow-up, and it's something that Mr. Appicello had brought up quite some time ago. I think we've talked about it, and you clarify, because I'm going to get this wrong. You had brought up to our attention about a software program that would allow us to track throughout the system here when ordinances or whatever went from department to department. And I'm sorry?
I believe it's the agenda.
Agenda, that's it, thank you. Well, no, it was more
Yeah,
than that.
no, it was something we talked about during my evaluation, which was agenda processing software, agenda management software.
Right, now, did we ever discuss that?
Not with me. We have talked about it, but I
Okay,
have not talked about it.
has anything proceeded on that? Because it seemed a good idea to me.
I've talked to Mr. Chandler about it, I've talked to the IT people, I've talked to Kathy about it. I think we're going to be doing something.
Is that something to bring up in budget?
Yes, but let me put it in a little bit larger of a context, and that is in our records management process. We have tried in the past some different records programs to varying levels of success. We've recently decided that there is a great need that we have for improving our records management ability to search electronically. That begins with, we have formed a committee, and that begins with taking a step back and looking at the human element of it first, defining what it is we're actually trying to accomplish and going through the process. We can easily add that into this discussion. Not discuss that with Mr. Avicello, putting that into it, but they go hand in hand, and so we've already started this process, I don't imagine, and we are anticipating coming to you with a proposal for that as part of next year's budget. So in other words, short answer is yes, we will discuss this, and yes, as far as the budget goes, that's the appropriate place.
And then, yeah.
I think he meant an agenda management program, not a records management
No,
program.
I understand that. I'm talking about adding that to the larger part of our records management system.
Yep, I understood that part. And then just let folks know, I attended the Coastal Woodcarvers Show last week. Terrific event. We have some world-class carvers living here in Lincoln City, and if you missed it, you missed it. You need to go next year. It's a great event and something you can bring the whole family to and enjoy an afternoon at. If there's nothing else.
There is. Were those offered for sale?
Oh, yeah, yeah. There was, well, okay, I'll take that. 99% was yes. There was a judging area. I'm going to assume they were for sale, but I didn't see any price tags on those. But, boy, it was beautiful. It's just the one I voted, they asked me to go each year for the Mayor's Award, and I swear I was looking at a real owl perched on a stick. It was just amazing. So always a treat to go to, and to see the young folks coming up into that hobby, too. If nothing else, we are adjourned. May God bless you all. May God bless Lincoln City.
Microphones are off.